Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm glad you could join us tonight for our third episode of redesigning Ghostbusters villains from the classic cartoon, The Real Ghostbusters. Something I really enjoyed watching as a kid, and honestly I still watch it as an adult. So we've been busy just redesigning this villain from an episode called Slimer Come Home, and this character's name is Ghash, and we are at a stage where we've got the design here, we've got all of our ambient shadows in, and now we're going to start filling in all of the color information, which is a very exciting phase. And so we're going to be doing some color stuff and throwing some textures in, and then we'll be sort of just like working on the lighting progressively. So I'm definitely excited to jump back into this. Again, thanks for joining me. If you're doing something creative, remember to save often. Let's jump in here. So I gave a little bit of a preview of some of the next steps at the end of last stream. We're going to continue that, and let's go ahead and turn off our gradients and our pattern overlay. Let's isolate that color so we can continue painting with it. And let's get all the skin areas blocked in. Now, this is one of those stages where you can kind of just zone out, right? Because there's not a lot of creative choice going in yet. This is just sort of technical methodical work to get in and define all of these regions, but when you're doing it in layers like this is like an unavoidable step. But yeah, I don't mind it. Something you can do is I like to use a little action I made to fill the shape in quickly, so we don't have to necessarily spend all that time manually painting in all those areas. And then maybe we'll erase away some of the parts that will be an obviously different material, like his teeth. So you can work in reverse, right? You can kind of fill it all in and then selectively erase. Or we could even just paint the color on top too. That would work fine as well. And then things that are going to be a different color, but they're still sort of fleshy, I'm going to have those just still be part of this overall base flesh tone. So I'm just going to kind of like only define regions that are a dramatically different material in this pass. I'm going to leave room for that chain connecting things. And it's kind of interesting about the stage is that some areas that maybe felt like they were not super clearly defined with the shadow phase can become very evident just through giving them their own flat color. So maybe the takeaway there is maybe don't worry about everything being hyper defined just via the shadows. I mean, it's nice when you've got good form information, but you know, getting 100% is not always necessary, especially if we're talking about really small, subtle things. I guess we're gonna have. Oh, that's the goblin's hand, so we need to work around that. But obviously this part is the villain's hand, so we need to include that. So it occurred to me that I don't know that my streaming schedule is easy to find. I believe on Twitch it shows it somewhere. I don't know if on YouTube it does. So I'll just mention it here, and then I'll, in the future, try to make that easier to find. But it's Thursdays, 9:30 to 11:30 Pacific Standard Time. For the moment, I mean, I can't say that it'll be that way till infinity, but seems to be working out okay for the moment. So we'll stick to that. Oh, I guess I could have just included this, right? His body's back there. And then I think I'll just include all of the mouth. We'll leave the tongue separate. I have a thought that maybe the tongue could be a different color. I think the rest of the mouth can just be part of this base flesh color. And that's all cloak there, so we can leave that out. And the drippy bits there are, you know, transparent, so I'll just include those in the background color. So you can see I'm trying to do here is just define all of the outer borders, so we can just use that quick fill. And I believe Clip Studio Paint has quite a nice fill option. Photoshop's needs a little bit of help on that front, so my action tries to deal with some of the aliasing that happens with the fill tool. It works all right, I think. I guess we sort of missed the shadow in that area, right? I'm going to go ahead and make a swatch from this color so we don't have to go finding it again. I'll go up to my shadows and let's define some of that shadow in this negative space here. Oops. What was that? Library is a single source of, what the heck is that? Some new fancy Photoshop nonsense? Let's nuke that with fire. Okay. There we go. That's better. Okay, grab that color again, get back to our skin definition. And in this particular method we're using, this is important to do before we try to bring in any reflectivity on the surface, because we need to see how that's interacting with the material and control that value carefully. As you'd imagine, if we tried to paint reflectivity on it now, it's against a very light color, and we'd want to make sure we mid-tone that before we do that. So if you're somebody who likes to just paint in grayscale, and you certainly could work that way as well. But this process here is a little bit of a hybrid of working in color and but sort of thinking in grayscale. All right, is that everything? I think, let's see, we can, oh, no, I think we missed something there. I gotta kind of follow my marks. Is it this? I think it's that spot right there. Yep, okay. Cool. The hand is maybe a little bit boxier than I'd want it to be. We might end up liquefying that to have a little more natural arc to it. That's something we can do later. And that is one thing that Photoshop does not have, is the ability to liquefy multiple layers at once. I think Clip Studio does have that, so there's a point for Clip Studio. I do have a sort of experimental script that allows you to liquefy multiple layers, but I have not tested the stability of that enough yet to try and use it here on stream, but at some point we might tinker with that a little bit, because it's cool that we could do that maybe in the middle of our layered process here. All right, we got that section defined, and then, oh, I guess yeah, I think we decided to have a little negative space there. Let's do this arm. Here we go. You guys are probably used to seeing these like fancy time lapses on the TikToks there, where all this stuff happens in like 2 seconds. Well, it might be surprising to know that these things do not take 2 seconds to do. Oh, whoops, that's the guy's body. There we go. Okay, let's get this top edge. Some of that stuff is a little bit soft in there, no worries. Still got it handled. Couple cleanup spots. Let's get the rest of the hand. Sometimes I have to like double check my shadow layer to see if I was what I was indicating. Probably a sign that it needed to be a little bit better defined. All right, boom, that's that. Okay, are we missing anything? Sometimes it's easy to like miss a little piece somewhere. I think that's good. So now what I want to do is get the rest of the body defined, but this is going to be, actually I might just paint it with this same color, and then we'll just do like a gradient on the lower body. Yeah, I think that sounds good. So let's just keep going with what we're using here with this color. And I guess the shadow is intending to go all the way up there, so make that the edge. It's important to not get distracted by the underdrawing line, because you may have changed it a little bit in the shadow pass, because that's part of what we like about this process, right, is that the underdrawing is loose, and in the shadow pass, we're sculpting and possibly tweaking the design. So, I mean, it may be helpful to just turn off the underdrawing in this phase so we're not distracted by those lines at all. I think either way is totally fine. It's on layers, right? That's what's nice. We can just set this up however it works best for us. Provides maximum clarity. Man, I've been having some allergies lately, and my eye just keeps watering. So you'll have to deal with me dabbing my eye from time to time here. So this is where you could potentially turn on that brush smoothing again to try and get that nice single clean stroke. But I think the difference here is that when we were making the initial shadow shape, we were defining the edge for the first time. So we didn't have to be following anything precisely. We just wanted to have it look smooth. Whereas now with this black color pass, we're more concerned with just having it match the shadow's edge. And for that, I feel like I just would rather kind of inch along the sides so that we get it matching up really nicely. Okay, let's come up here. We can also, I'll show you guys. So you could also just use the polygonal lasso. You have to be careful because it can sometimes make the piece look a little bit too digital. Like you got to be aware of any little corners that might sneak in, because a corner of a polygonal shape there is going to immediately reveal that you used the lasso tool for something. So something to be cautious about. Here, this edge is a little bit ill-defined, so we'll just take this opportunity to use the colors to choose an edge. So again, where I want to say, like, just because that edge isn't super crisp in your shadow, it doesn't indicate you've screwed up or something. It just means that you didn't feel like having a really distinct shadow there. Not all your forms are going to get haloed with consistent levels of shadow. I mean, that would look artificial and strange. And part of the beauty of working in a 2D environment is leveraging that abstract lost edge that you can have, something that a 3D render can't have, right? Unless there was some kind of post processing on it, or yeah, obviously you painted over it. And it's something that we'll actually do later in this piece when we do this sort of paint over phase after we're done doing all these sort of like layered steps, is we will evaluate if there's places where a lost edge would enhance the image. It's harder to do a lost edge when you have things split into layers like this. You're never going to find a process that is perfect. in every way. It's nice to try and chase it, but there's always going to be pros and cons to every method of working, and the key is to just be aware of what those are so that you can work around them, so that the flaws are hidden to the viewer, right? It might be there, but if nobody can detect them, then it's as if they didn't exist at all. It's like, the psychology of it all, an aspect of presentation and expectation. It's funny because I think about it in relation to like health problems you might have, right? Like I have asthma, for example, and sure, it'd be nice to not have asthma, obviously, but I can't wave a wand and get rid of it. So, you try to manage it. And if you are sort of, hopefully there are ways to manage it. I know not everything is as easy as that, but the better you manage it, the more it can fade into the background. So, I'm not always thinking about it. And if you're aware of the weaknesses of your process, you find ways to work around them, and then you're not sort of hyper fixated on them. Those weaknesses kind of fade into the background. Little curly Q shape there. Doing this on an Intuos tablet, and I like that better than a Cintiq for ergonomic reasons. But sometimes with this very technical work where you're trying to follow an edge quickly, having a screen-based device can give you a little advantage. So in some cases, I would potentially pull out the Cintiq to do some of this work here, but yeah, it's like it's not a huge boost; it's just a slight boost, and so I'm sort of fine just muscling through it on the Intuos tablet. Which, speaking of tablets, I did want to mention. So, I recently upgraded my PC. This new version is using Photoshop 2025 and Windows 11. And I think I may have mentioned it in a recent stream how it's always a little bit nerve wracking to update everything because you're going to maybe encounter some technical issues. And I definitely was. There's a lot of weird lag going on, and I was able to fix most of it. I wanted to call out one thing that really helped me solve an annoying bug, which was that I had a delay whenever I would try to interact with sliders and menu options in Photoshop. I would sort of click and try to move, and it would sort of stutter, and then it would move. And there's a plugin called Lazy Nizumi Pro that I got. The developer of that is amazing, and sort of attempts to fix and address, in addition to creating a cool tool that gives you options that don't exist in Photoshop. They also have sought to try and address bugs in the software that really Adobe should be addressing, and it's been, I think, 10 plus years that these bugs have existed. And there's a fix in Lazy Nizumi for the delay that happens on your sliders and stuff. So that is really great. I highly recommend you guys check out that plugin, not only for that fix, but also just for the other things that it lets you do. I still not have solved some of the delay I have with things on the canvas like free transform. If I were to try and scale this, there's a little delay before it starts to actually drag, and it sounds very minor, but when you're doing those operations all the time, it sort of gets annoying. So I'm hoping I can sort of solve that that issue in the future. Now, why is that offset? Shouldn't be that. Oh, there we go. Okay, I just had a weird. I think I moved my selection before I filled it in. Okay, we should be able to do that safely here and here. Excellent. Now it looks quite weird with that all being flesh color down there. I mean, we could do that, but I think that looks a little almost too grotesque. So we're gonna make it look like kind of ghost energy, you know, like spectral, whatever blue green stuff. We'll figure it out. Okay, I think we got that flat solved. Let's block in the cloak. I think that's a good one to tackle next. I like to do the big regions first because it feels like I'm making a lot of progress, and that gives me momentum. It kind of keeps me fueled to power ahead. So like if we were to at this point maybe start noodling on belt buckles, I don't know. I feel like it would be I feel like a slog, right? So let's go ahead now. And so one trick that I do to make this process go faster where we're doing consecutive flats is I'll put the new flat on a layer below the flats I've already done. So that way I don't have to be careful about redefining this edge. Whatever I'm doing next is going to just kind of get painted behind it, and I can be sort of sloppy about adding that in. So I think this is going to end up being probably like a warm gray. So we can try that as the swatch. Let's see how that looks. See, value wise, it's different. So that's good. Yeah, we'll stick with that. And it's easy for us to change our mind later. But as you can see, I'm just painting willy-nilly on this edge, and I don't have to care about the precision here because this layer lives underneath the one we've already defined. Now here I have to be careful because this is a new edge, but essentially what we're doing is we're never defining the same edge twice. And as we define big areas, there are less and less edges that we need to define, and everything sort of like progressively gets faster. So that's a way to sort of make your process of painting in all the flats a little bit easier. Again, also to just not bothering with painting in the inner regions. Sounds like a very minor savings, but it adds up. Outlines only. And if you're doing this stuff and you feel like you just are not getting the right angles and strokes going, it's really just a practice, right? It's just getting a little bit more time. Mark making, you might need to warm up a little bit first. You know, my streams are in the evening toward the end of the day. Well, I stay up pretty late, but you know, it's certainly not the morning for me. And I've had time to like warm up and do some painting or drawing or whatever typically. And that has these marks coming out all just a little bit easier than if it was the first thing I was trying to draw. Now we've got a couple, I guess that's going to be included. I don't want the ends of these included because that's going to be metal. I guess I can just open this up. All right, that's all just going to be that same color there. Now this one is going to be metal here. So we'll define this. And then let's make sure we create a border there. And now we fill it in. Boom. Save your work. Next section, let's do this piece up here. Actually, yeah, let's do the hat too. I know it's going to be a kind of like a ghost hat, but I do want the option of maybe having some parts of it feel physical. maybe it's more physical up here, and then at the bottom it gets more ghostly. Okay, bottom edge, and there we go. Now I'm going to look at my underdrawing to see where this edge is, because we didn't do any shadow for this part. Cool. Turn it back off. Let's see now. We got to avoid these little clasps. And we're going to connect it here. Hey, Tom, it's going good, man. How are you? All right. Get this tiny little horn outlined. Whoops. Cut into the form a little too much there. There we go. And then I think this is just open, right? There's nothing there. So we'll leave that. Cut it there. And then make sure we define this edge here. Let's see, did we get a clean one? Yeah, we got it. It's always satisfying to get it the first time. Tired, you woke up? Yeah, yeah. It definitely takes me a little while to become coherent when I wake up, especially if I'm trying to do something creative. Oh, that shadow's a little sloppy there. Let's clean that up. There we go. The other thing that can be helpful is to name your layers, right? To stay a bit organized in your file. And so I might just quickly rename this to, also call this cloak. something to be cautious of in this process is with this technique is not to lose volume as you're painting things in. Like it's easy to start to like slice in to the shadows too much and then you kind of lose volume, everything gets thin, so just be careful about that. I find it's much easier to cut in too much than to leave too much on the outside. Also, you're seeing that I'm going back to the shadow layer in certain cases where I feel like I need to edit it. And that's another thing is just feel the freedom to go back and tweak that stuff. In most cases, it's better to try and address it now versus waiting till piece is a little bit more complex. Okay, we got a big shape here. So, there's some like sloppiness there, but it's all going to get filled in, right? We don't really need to worry about cleaning that up. So again, like little time savings here and there, not fussing about the stuff that isn't going to matter. Really, yeah, time management and being able to produce things on time for clients and predictable quality and everything is really important. There's always going to be extra hurdles when you're working on professional work versus personal work. So you want to be kind of like almost like over prepared or overly ready for those sorts of challenges. Okay, what are we doing here? I guess I can just color this all in so we don't have to worry about this sort of little extra bit. Oh, we forgot to paint in the flesh on that layer. That's cool. I'll get to that in a second. See, there's always little things that we might miss. Okay, let's get that going there. Did we get, I think maybe if we just fill this last line, I think we might be good to just fill that shape in. Oh, we need to get this. I think it's just this buckle, right? Yeah. Okay. Okay, and then this is like layered on top of itself, so that's not a big deal. Okay, so I think we're ready to just... Oh, nope. Almost forgot about this one. We could have even made the straps a different color, but at this point in time, I'm not thinking that's needed. But yeah, we can tweak that later if we really want to. All right, did we get it all? I don't know. Let's try it. Here we go. Oh, pretty good. Got a couple little spots here and there. Not too bad. Actually, it looks like it was just offset again. Look at that. I wonder why that's happening. Let's see here. Let me try this again. F5. Weird. Okay. I guess I'll have to be careful about that. I guess there's... I don't know, there's like a tendency it's having to like offset it. So cool. All right, good. Let's save that and fill in that bit of the skin that we were missing. Okay, let's do that tongue next. It's a pretty obvious one that we got to get to. And I think, well, yeah, I'm gonna go with like a purple gray for the moment. But usually what I do is I just put in what I think will work initially, and then when we see the entire thing together is when we'll really know what sort of colors will work best. Can we benefit from that line we've already defined there? Let's see. Okay, pretty clean. All right, that color is interesting. That might work. We'll have to see. And now we can do, well, like, let's do these clasps. That's an easy thing. Name that layer. And I think I'll go with like maybe like a little bit of a warmer. So we want it to stand against the flesh though. Does it want to be like a cooler? Let's see. Well, it's going to be more reflective, so that'll help it stand off alone. Just the material there. I could do more of a blue. I think that probably warrants the tongue also being more of a blue like that. And then there's going to be like kind of a bluish green maybe down here. So, okay. All right. I'm starting to see how this might work. You of course want to consider like the tone of the character too, right? Like this guy is not intended to look whimsical, right? Or certainly not friendly. So we want to be careful about color schemes that might start to lean it in that direction. And I think in my overall reimagining of these characters, this adaptation of them, I'm wanting it to take on a little bit of a, I don't want to say darker tone, but like it's a little bit more serious versus like a kids cartoon, right? So I think that we having a palette that's a little bit more somber lends itself to that sort of mood that we might want. So we'll see. Let's. I was thinking about the color of these little gremlin ghosts, and I think they maybe can also live in that cooler category. Oh, look at, we missed that little spot there on the cloak. I guess I got to grab that color. Okay. Definitely struggling with that tiny little spot. All right. So I guess we can try to choose a color for those gremlins. So this is the cloak clasps. Oh, I wonder if they want to be. I'm thinking that the bottom of them is also a sort of spectral. Like the bottom of them sort of matches the way we're going to treat the bottom of him, and then we'll have those color cues that help our eye flow through the design. I mean, we're already getting some nice flow just with the length of this cloak, right? But yeah, I think that that would be helpful as well. So we don't want to use anything for the top of the gremlin. It's going to make the bottom part not obvious. They're against, but I think a cooler color is probably better because they're against the warm gray and the warm skin. Maybe they're like a dark gray green, and they could be different colors too, certainly. Let's go. Let's try green. Let's try like a forest green. Go for more of a mid tone. Oh, thanks, Tom. I appreciate that. Feel like we're making some good progress. Oh, I guess there was a little bit of skin showing through the fingers. I missed that. Let's add this to our swatches. Here's that alert again. Your library cannot be modified because it is a read-only library. What does that even mean? Photoshop, give me a break. Chill out, Photoshop. Jeez. Outrageous. We'll figure that out after the stream. Is that, I guess there's a little bit of flesh in there too. Okay, yep. Let's go back to our gremlin buddy. And I don't need to color all this in. I just need to do it. Well, yeah, I'll just include the fingernails in this pass for now because it's such a small element. We can easily add that back in later. In fact, I'll just kind of color all this in. But the smaller stuff, I don't mind just manually painting it all in. Doesn't take that much time to just quickly brush this all. But certainly those really big areas we were working on before, like the skin and the cloak, that was nice that we could just fill it in. You're digging the green. Okay, cool. Yeah, I think that might be like I think it's close to what we want. I think we can tune it a little bit if we need to, but certainly is helping them stand out against the elements that they're in front of, which is I think the primary concern I have. There's a pretty clear line for this skin versus the gum line, so I think we'll just do an actual line for that. fill this in. Ooh, I think we missed a spot. Let's see. Can we fill it in now? Yeah, we got most of it. It's angry little Cyclops goblin ghost. You know, and then let's just paint this because we can use it as a mask for the gradient. So that's, yeah, same strategy we're using for the big guy. One of the things that I'm sort of contemplating is, you know, if their bodies are going to be partially ghostly and spectral and maybe kind of glowy or emissive, if we wanted to get technical with it, then yeah, you kind of want the background to be a little darker to complement that. And I have not settled on what I want to do with the background. Now we have a fairly ambient looking situation, so um, we could go just sort of like lighter. We could do this sort of like a foggy light gray thing, which I think is one direction I'm considering. But we still have quite a lot of options on the table, so I'm going to go just a little bit less saturated with that, a little bit lighter. Did that just change on me? Oh, let's go a little darker. There we go. Okay, cool. And what about this guy here? What about this guy? Well, let's first all name the Slayer. We'll call this the Green Gob. And then this other guy on the right, we'll call him something when we decide on the color. Maybe this guy. Maybe this guy's a little bit more on the gray, green, blue side. Maybe he's more like that. I don't know. I'm going to block it in using this color and then we can adjust in a moment. I want him to feel different than the other guy, but I still want him to work with our overall scheme. And we created some fun details, so we'll have to paint around those. Trying to think if I want to do. I think I'm going to. I'm going to make the gum line different, but I'm going to make this inner cheek this color, and then we can kind of use a gradient to come from the inside of the mouth to the edge there. Once again, we'll make sure the nails are a different color, but it's so tiny. I just want to fill it in and then use this as the mask later to define those nails. It's all about the path of least resistance. Okay, we got that. We got this and that. Get his ear. Chin, neck, chest, and fill. Nope, nope. None of that. None of what just happened. Let's see. There we go. Wrong button. And let's get his eyes carved out. I don't know what color his eyes would be, but I'm thinking maybe. Oh, you know what? We messed up on this. That's cool. We'll just erase it. Nice. And nice. And we messed up the teeth. Yeah, we kind of messed up a lot of stuff, didn't we, when we did that? Oh well. I'll just erase it out. It's all good. It looked fine at first, and then on second glance, I noticed it didn't work as well as I had wanted, but that's okay. Okay, that was kind of what I was thinking would happen. And now we can do the body. Let's see, value wise, I think we can maybe go a little brighter with that. Okay, cool. Now we can also do like a global brightness adjustment on all of the flats to change the amount of ambient light that we want to imply in the scene. That's the other thing to remember is that this is the 2D world that we're in. As much as we're trying to think about it in 3D, Photoshop is not aware of like the math of a 3D scene. So when we add the local values, we're choosing the color and we're choosing the value, but at the same time, we're defining some degree of ambient light in the scene, right? There's a lighting choice going on there. So, whereas if we were in like a 3D scene, we could choose the color and the color value, but we could have a scene with no lights and the scene would be black, but the computer would still know that that object was supposed to be whatever, a medium green. So it's interesting, right? As somebody who works both in 2D and 3D, I'm comfortable in both mediums. I find it fun to think about like those sort of comparisons, and I think it kind of leads to some interesting workflows. Right. So I think we've got all the big stuff figured out. Let's get the rest of these little metal details blocked in. I kind of feel like maybe just whatever we're doing with the chains here probably wants to just be for these buckles as well. So let's name the layer we just did. We'll call that other green gob, or maybe we'll call it green gob right. So I know which one that is. And the other one will be green gob left. We'll go back to our cloak clasp layer. We'll select this color here and paint it in for these elements. We've got one more over here. Okay. Now I want to get those fangs defined. And we can do his teeth at the same time. I guess, you know what, for this one, let's go ahead and erase it out of this layer. There's really no right or wrong way to approach this, but I do try to think about, again, like what's the easier way to add this in. And with the teeth, since they're erased away on his face, if I'm going to include the fangs, then I'd rather have them both be tackled in the same way. The consistency just kind of helps my brain stay organized. Right, okay. So now we can go to a layer underneath everything. We can call this main teeth. And we'll select a more yellow tone like that. Like that. Let's go a little bit lighter with it so we get some value difference, but we don't want to be giving him some very nice sparkly pearly white teeth because that feels that definitely out of character. So I think that's pretty good starting point for it. The flesh inside parts, those will be fun. Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing some of that gradient work and getting some of those specular details in. I suppose we could probably also use the same layer to block in some of this stuff, right? Because I think, well, let's see, how's that value read? Ooh, maybe this guy wants to have darker horns, but we can go with lighter teeth. Trying to make sure he doesn't get lost in the background there. This is one of those things where, as a 2D piece, we can be really particular about these choices, but you know, if this was just purely a concept piece, then this guy obviously would need to work in all kinds of scenarios, so we couldn't just consider choices as it relates to the composition here. I mean, if you think about illustration, like illustrators obsess about that one composition, right? Like that one picture and how everything works, how everything reads. But concept artists really have to think about other scenarios. That's not in any way to diminish what illustrators do. It's just a different challenge, right? It's just a different goal. And I think we'll go ahead and go on top and, oh, you know what? Let's do this. I'm going to link this layer to green gobble left and we can fill in the fingernails. So the way I'm doing this is different, right? Like these were excluded from the skin, so I just painted those right in. These regions are already in the skin, so now what I'm doing is I'm creating a layer on top of the green skin, and I'm using a clipping mask to that green skin, so I can just paint the fingernails right on. And we'll do that for this guy as well. And this is how we'll also establish the various sort of gradients as well, variations. Notice how I'm using the same bone color for different things, and that's because I really like working with a limited palette. I think it's easier to control. I think it gives the right sort of tone we're looking for. We can introduce subtle variants in other ways, but I'm always cautious about sort of like, you know, uh, getting all, you know, candy store with the base colors here. Okay, let's do those horns because that was something where I was like thinking about it being darker, and I want to see if that's going to work, and I think it will. Okay, let's go a little bit lighter, probably right around there because it's got to read against this, but it's also got to read against the side of his head, and his head is a little darker than the cloak is, right? So now we can go ahead and isolate that color and fill in the rest of the horn. And I'm shooting for readability, but notice I'm also not uh, creating extreme contrast between them, because when you go for really extreme contrast like that, it can start to feel very like artificial, and and you start to lose. Um, you sort of like, you like you're using all of your most powerful tools too quickly, right? Like you kind of want to save some of those for later when you might need them to get out of the tight spot. So I try to like ease into that stuff. So that I think works. And now we should probably do like the inside. Oh, I guess to keep it consistent with the way we did this guy, maybe we should have that green of the skin come in to this cheek area. So let's go ahead and grab that green. I guess the gums we're kind of seeing gum. I guess I'll just kind of pull it in like this. Sure. Okay. That's cool. I'm okay with that. This is horns. And we'll do, now the cool thing about like monsters and stuff is that you don't have to do predictable colors. We don't have to necessarily use a warmer tone, but I think I'm still going to go with a warmer tone for this, because I think it's going to read nicely against the color of their skin. And now for the eyes, I think that the eyes probably want to have a bit of a glow to them, and I think we want to be consistent about the color of the glow all throughout this piece. And I think we're going to go for like a cyan green thing. So maybe before we add the eye color, maybe we should sort of play with it on the main body a bit and see if we're going to like that or not. So let's go ahead and turn on our, you remember last time we started to bring in some gradients in the face here. I'll turn that back on. In fact, I'll name this. We'll call it face variants. And then this one will be glow. And at this point, I'm going to go ahead and drop the amount of ambient light in our scene by a bit. Okay, that shape is still reading okay. All right, glow. Let's see. I'm looking at I've got a couple images over here that are like kind of ghost looking images, and so I'm just kind of seeing what colors I like. I'm seeing some blues, I'm seeing some greens. Um, let's see. Yeah, we'll play with a little bit of the warmth in the backside here. So I want to evaluate the color. Obviously, we want to also evaluate the local values of this choice. And if we want to, now notice that when we go to grayscale, these are different colors, but they're the same value. And that can be good. Like it's good that we can do that if we want to. Like maybe we're wanting the body to read as one continuous shape. We don't want to really segment it. And so when we make a hue shift without a value shift, the body will read more as one piece. And obviously, rules of design, we always want to think about how we're segmenting things. And I do have concern that if we were to make extreme value shift here that we might start to slice this character in half. I don't want that. So the fact that they are living in a similar value range, I think, is not necessarily a bad thing. But since it is on its own layer, we can easily play with a version where this is brighter, right? And we can see if we like that or not. Or if perhaps we want to just go brighter more towards the ends. So I think there's could be something interesting about that. A little bit of that kind of like glowiness, kind of spectral feeling. We'll have it try to give off a little bit of light in the final lighting. I'm thinking that that tongue maybe wants to shift to be a little bit more green now. We have a little more green going on overall in the piece. So let's adjust that a little bit. Let's go a little bit more like that color there. I think the buckles and everything can also just shift slightly more green. So that's going to be on this layer. So just, yeah, you can see just very subtle changes, but they help make the piece feel more cohesive. And I think this guy gets a little bit lost right now. We sort of like read the tongue, and this guy I think are a little too similar. So let's change Green Gob right. I'll go a little darker with him. And just we want to make sure that at a glance, like this reads as a very clear, separate object than the tongue is. Okay, cool. You just kind of like take a moment when you make these big choices and just sit with it for a second, see how you're feeling about it. No need to rush it. Okay, so let's take some of this color now, this green color, and let's bring it in up here. So we've got the goblin eyes, we've got his eyes, and then I want to try to play with it. Maybe I don't know if the hat actually becomes spectral. Maybe there's just a glow in the inside of the hat, and that I think might be interesting too. So this is the gob mouths, new layer, sample this green. Oops. Oh, we're getting crazy over here. We're getting crazy. Calm down. Okay. Glowing there, glowing there, glowing there. See, so notice now we've got these little hits of the green, so now our eye doesn't get stuck down here, right? We see some of it happening up here, and it doesn't have to just be there. Could maybe introduce it elsewhere. Maybe there's some from inside this mouth. So there's almost like a jack-o'-lantern kind of thing going on in there. Could be interesting. I'd like to play with, where is the cloak layer? Play with the idea of like some inner light in here, maybe. That's something that likely wants to be above the shadow layer ultimately, but okay, actually let's cut that. Let's do it on an add layer above. Oops, not Q. We don't want it to say Q. We want it to say A for add. Okay, now we can, oh, actually, let's, where's the cloak? We'll isolate it. It's sort of like glowing hat thing going on. And obviously, like we're gonna finesse that, but it's popping it in right now for just a quick hit. Yeah, I think that's good because I think that like creates like a nice uh, bookend on the design. You know, sort of bookend it with those glowing features. I think that's going to look nice. Kind of want to start to bring in a little bit of atmospheric stuff in the background, just a little bit of gradient to start to feel the physical space that this is in versus it being so flat. That tends to help me calibrate some of the lighting and whatnot. So let's go ahead and we can use, you see some of my cloud brushes to just create a little bit of variation on the background here. And I don't know that I want it to be quite as warm. I'm thinking maybe it's just slightly warm, but I don't know. We'll see. We'll see where this goes. I'm sort of looking. I've got again some images over here of like foggy London. If you remember, I said that I had like a Jack the Ripper set of images that I was looking at, and so I'm just sort of looking at just some different foggy scenes, and maybe we try and capture a little bit of that. So and the interesting thing is this guy's floating, but he's glowing. We got some interesting challenges here to contend with. I'm going to go ahead and start to put in a little bit of a suggestion of a shadow here, a very soft one, and then we may have to sort of augment it as we bring in a suggestion of light also emitting. But you can see why it can be helpful to, whoops, what do I want? This one. How it can be helpful to think about this in stages because it's really hard to get this stuff mathed out in your head. I mean, we're inventing this, right? This is like, there's no, I don't have like, you know, pig ghosts in my room next to me looking at me that I can just like paint a la prima like I'm John Singer Sargent over here. Like this is, we're crafting this from nothing. So I have to create a process where I can sort of problem solve in stages to create that convincing quality to things. I think that sometimes throws new artists off as they think that they're supposed to be able to like just craft incredibly believable perfection in just one stage. And it just, I mean, certain people, yeah, you can get to that level, especially with things that you might paint more often, but that's a very, very unrealistic target to hit. So let's see. I want to also play around with the idea of, I guess we could still use our cloud brushes. Maybe there's like some more light in certain areas. So sometimes I like to do like extreme tweaks to just see, you know, what it would look like in a different situation, right? Um, I think I want to go. I think I want to go lighter with the atmosphere on this. Sort of like, yeah, like kind of ghostly, foggy atmosphere. The question is, what's the value, right? Because I think we either have to go lighter so that the cloak is dark against the lightness, or we have to go much darker so that the body reads in the opposite way. I think I'm liking this a little bit more. So let's try this. And Green Gob left. I think I want to shift his skin to just be slightly more, blue, and a little less saturated, a little lighter overall. Okay. Let's start to add some of the gradients into the stomach area there. I think that might be kind of fun. And we already have a layer that's doing some of that. I'll just call this skin variants. We also don't have any textures in here yet, right? Like this is all just very simple color work going on. But this is really the most important thing. You got to get this stuff solved first. Okay, yep. All right, here it goes. Oh, it's so gross. A little extra saturation around where those things connect. Maybe the tongue has a little bit of a gradient as well, so it doesn't feel so like abrupt. So let's attach a variance layer to our tongue, and let's bring in a little bit of this flesh tone in there. And I think it kind of almost suggests a little bit of like the color play that's happening in there too, right? Like some of the light maybe bouncing around. And that's something, we'll definitely want to consider as well, as obviously like light bouncing. But one of the things that we probably won't see as much is like strong reflections, because we're dealing with this sort of a foggy or very ambient type of scene. And so we may not really see a lot of crazy shininess and reflectiveness. All right. Let's go ahead and play with the amount of shadows we have. I think I'm sort of feeling like we can start to dial this in, although I want to make sure too that we have, whoops, that's crazy looking, isn't it? Let's move this back up, move that back down, move this over so it's not cut off. Okay. 5%. So I'm just dialing in a little bit darker shadows there by just duplicating our shadow layer and controlling the opacity on it. We can continue to kind of evaluate the grayscale version. Okay, let's continue with the skin work we were doing. I think we'll have a little bit more warmth in the top of the chest there. Yeah, if you're sort of wondering, like, where to put some of this variation, there's you can find guides online in terms of like where to have some of this variance. But like, hands tend to be a good place to go, a little bit warmer and darker. You can put it around some of the bony areas like knees and elbows, um, areas where there might be some sun exposure. You can put a little more there. I mean, I don't know if this guy's hanging out at the beach or not, but even still, like it kind of, there's a logic at least to how we're applying skin variation. And on the face, we have warmth around the sort of middle band of the face, certainly around any sort of openings, like around eyes, around the mouth, and subsurface scattering, things like the ends of ears. and then you'll get usually a little bit maybe more yellow around where the skin is thin. It's more closer to the bone, so we can shift to more of a yellow tone. I'll come in here and kind of do a little bit on the forehead here, and then you can go a little cooler with things in areas where you might have like some stubble or something. You got to be careful with that because it can look really extreme very easily. And so I'll just kind of bring in like maybe a little bit of relative gray in that spot. This is a fun part for you, gives the artwork life. Yeah, I agree. Like it starts to feel like a real a living, breathing thing on the canvas, which is really fun. Stuff like freckles and textures. Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. Definitely want to make sure we got lots of fun textures going on in this guy. And yeah, like lost edges too, right? Like if this is supposed to feel spectral down here, then we can play with some of it, like dissipating into the background and whatnot. That'll be super cool. So let's bring in some texture on the skin, and I'll just do a base here. This is what we put on real quickly last time. You can see it obviously is ridiculous because we didn't really care about it when we added it last time. I've got one here that I do like to try sometimes, which is a flesh option. And let's see if we go. Let's try. Sometimes we might have to adjust the saturation of the base layer to work with our overlay. We can also sort of change the rotation there. But this is fun because this texture has a lot of like weird skin stuff going on. I mean, you can see, right? It's like there's a lot of gross stuff, and we can paint some of this out, like where we don't like it as much. We can sort of get rid of it. We can also change the scale of it. Go a little smaller with it there. So that's pretty fun. We get some of that around the elbow there. So if we take the base skin color and we pull down the saturation, you can see that we can greatly affect how strong that is. So pull down the opacity there. Let's pull it up a bit. Let's take the saturation up. So maybe something like that. And we can just zoom in and see if we like some of the subtle stuff going on. Yeah, I think that's looking pretty cool. Give us a little bit of noise on the skin to work with. And the idea of this is that you would sort of let it drive further decisions in painting information. So, you can leave some of this stuff alone, right? But, in a lot of cases, it's good to get in and kind of tinker with it a bit. Let it give you ideas. Um, so I think I'm gonna dial it back ever so slightly. Let's go a little bit subtler with it. And now what I recommend is when you're using pattern overlays to rasterize the layer style. So you just right click the layer and choose rasterize layer style, and it's basically just going to collapse the, we get a little bit of a different effect there, don't we? I think that's because I was using soft light. Actually, I don't mind it though. Let's see. We lose a little bit of vibrance, don't we? Okay. Let's adjust the saturation just slightly there. But anyway, the reason I was going to say you want to rasterize it is because it does slow Photoshop down quite a bit when you have a lot of pattern overlays going, especially when they're like really high res. So then, yeah, you can come in here and you can smudge out and adjust some of the stuff that you feel like is just a little bit too loud, right? You can kind of get in here and mess with some of this stuff, like this cool stuff maybe going on here. Ooh, our hat glow layer got a little bit weird, didn't it? Let's see. Where is that layer? That layer should be... What is going on there? I guess it's just using his... Oh, I know what happened. Okay. Okay. We got this. Don't worry. No, just delete that. You need to go cloak minus the skin equals that. Okay. And then we can apply this, apply layer mask, then we can dither it selectively. Maybe, actually, maybe I'll just leave that the way it was for the moment. Let's do a soft erase. Let's pull this back a little bit. Okay, well, let's leave it like that for now. I wanted to just get better visibility on some of the skin details here, and I think that's actually working out okay. Let's see. Just remember there's a new student joining the school. Wasn't sure who to pick as mentor and asked what we think about some. I'm pretty sure he picked you in the end. He knew whose art style he liked, but wanted to know who's got a good teaching style as well. Oh, that's cool. I do have some students actually coming on board soon. So maybe it's one of those. Hopefully, hopefully they enjoy the course and are able to get them all the info they need to get rocking and rolling on their art path. So we've got some base texture there. And so I think the next big piece that we want to add some texture to is this big cloak, right? Like that's such a huge piece. And I think we want to definitely have some cool textures going on there. And like everything else, I like to just throw a pattern overlay on to just give us a base texture. And then we can maybe add more selective things if we need to. So cloak, double click that, pattern overlay, flesh cloak. No, we're not going to do that. As creepy as that would be, a cloak of flesh. That could be for another monster we do. But no, in this case, let's try something else. Let's do, I don't know. There's a million of these we can play with. No, that's kind of interesting. Let's set that to multiply and scale that up a bit. Yeah, that's kind of cool, right? Yeah. We get a little bit of color variation going on. So you can see how that really starts to add some nice dimensionality to this. I think it works well in this process because, we're so sort of precise and color booky with the steps before this that we really start to inject that variation, that texture, like that sort of painterly quality. We need to punch it in the face with some of those qualities, and this is a way for us to just start to shift it in that direction. Flesh cloak is a cool concept. Yeah, I mean, I think if the drawing lend itself to that, we could definitely go that route. I'm going to keep it in the back of my head, though. I will not forget about that idea because that could be a good use for that in the future. And so, yeah, if you've got a base texture like this, you're on your way, and then you can sort of think about, is there maybe some specific texturing that wants to happen to break this up a little bit? Like maybe the bottom of the cloak is a little bit sort of grungier and dirtier than the top because it's maybe, whatever, brushing against the ground or something. I always have like a sort of just collection of random, grungy photos and stuff on my hard drive. If you guys ever find cool images of things, save them, right? You could maybe use them. So like here, I've got this really crazy grunge texture. Let's go ahead and set that to multiply. Let's scale this down here like this. Kind of get that more toward the bottom of the cloak. You can see how we're starting to get something interesting there. Maybe we won't want that green. So maybe we'll turn the saturation down a bit, but maybe we adjust the hue. Okay, that seems like that might be good. Let's turn the opacity down. And of course, we'll erase this edge because that's a dead giveaway that we're overlaying stuff. So you can see how like this, just this subtle amount of gradation here going on really helps bring a new level of realism and immersion to this design. Let's go ahead and do it over here. Okay, cool. And let's see what's going on with this hat. I think the hat's probably fine as it is. We'll probably inject more character into that in these next phases. Okay. Let's go ahead and rasterize that layer style. I think we're good. Oh, like, you know what? If I do this, is it gonna make a weird different look? No, it worked that time. Yeah, I'm not sure what was going on with that other one. I think it was just the way that I had the layers stacked. It was giving us a slightly different look. I can keep these grunge layers as their own thing because that's not a pattern overlay. It's just a texture on multiply. It's just a layer on multiply. So that's not tough on our machine at all. I did want to play with the idea of like the glow in the mouth here. I'm not sure that might be too loud. I don't want to be super loud with this design. But it's easy to test, right? So why not try it? Let's grab this glow color here. In fact, let's go with the one down here. And let's just say, maybe it doesn't have to be a big glow either. It could be subtle. Maybe it's sort of, let's just play with a little bit of that coming out of the mouth there. So one of the things we have to be conscious of is that the mouth is reading well without the glow because it's darker. There's a shadow there. And if we add glow, we need to make sure that the glow isn't subtle so that it basically puts the mouth shadows into the same value range as the rest of the skin, right? Like if we just go halfway with the glow, you can see how it sort of just starts to even it out, and we don't want it to feel flat. So this is where you have to sort of commit. I think you have to kind of go heavy enough that it reads, or don't do it at all. Now, I mean, the way that the amount that it spreads out, I think, is up to us. But like, see now that I think that reads a bit better there. Yeah, I think that's kind of a fun little. It's kind of a fun little addition there. So I think we'll keep that. I like that idea. Yeah, I'm thinking about if I want to have any more directional lighting in the scene or not. Where at the moment we're committed to an ambient style, but doesn't mean we have to stay with that. I kind of like that idea, but I don't know. Let's see. So I'll go ahead and set this to multiply. Let's duplicate our flats and copy them. Make that a mask. Okay. Set this to 30%. And I want to just see. So if I was going to do lighting in this with a more directional light, I would probably do lighting from above. Now I've got this turned pretty high up on opacity because I want to just see what shapes I'm making. And we're going to just think about one light source so I don't complicate things, right? Meaning I'm not thinking about the glow from the hat as I'm doing this. And I don't need to necessarily do this everywhere to know if I'm going to like it or not. I usually just try it on the face first, because if I don't like it on the face, then, you know, it's sort of like, it's not going to work. It's not going to, I'm not going to get sold on it by the rest of it. So there's a little bit going on here. I guess we can do like the stomach having a shadow as well. So again, to be clear, this is me testing whether I want another light in the scene. Now, also we can decide how diffuse we want this light to be. With a very hard edge like this, then we're indicating that the light is pretty close to the subject and is creating a pretty intense edge. But we could still have this sort of sense of lighting from above in a diffused way, and we could just sort of blur this out. And that would also work. So if you were to go, you know, if you were to really blur it out, right, then you'd be back in ambient world, but you'd at least be giving a little bit of light and dark dimensionality to it. You can adjust, of course, the intensity of it as well. You could go, you can see, you can go really, really crazy with it, which is kind of fun to look at. But so I think I'm liking a little bit of what this is doing, but I don't want to kill the ambient look. So I think I'm going to just be careful about how diffused we're going to be with this. So when you decide to add something like this, you have to be thorough, right? You can't just sort of do it only in certain areas, right? You got to kind of make sure it feels like it's a comprehensive approach, because in reality, it's not like you could decide to just have the light only hitting one. Oh, I guess you could with very specific lighting setup, but not the type of light we're indicating here, right? Like this is a global lighting choice. So just kind of be aware of that. I do see a lot of students that have lighting in their images that doesn't make a lot of sense, and we definitely don't want to have that going on. I know that there's a little bit of glow down here, but I'm going to just kind of bring in a little bit of this shadow, so that, again, because we need to think about each light source on its own. Diffuse it out. The way I'm diffusing this is just with a smudge brush that has some texture on it, and I'm still aware of the strokes I'm making because I don't want it to feel super soft. I want it to still have like a sense that I'm making these brush marks. It's just leaving a sense of, like, that craftsmanship, that human mark, which if you want to hear somebody wax on about that idea in actually a really great way, you can go check out some of Peter Moorbacher's videos. He talks about that on his YouTube, and I was like, yeah, man, that's exactly why that's great. You're saying it in a really great way. All right, we got this here. Kind of bring it into the tongue a little bit. Might have some in the mouth as well. You can blur out this little edge here. Okay, now I can delete shadow out of the eyes themselves because those are glowing. We might even, depending on how bright we want them to look, we could have an indication of some of the light actually hitting the area around the eyeball as well, but something we can add later. Let's bring in some texture on the gob skin. Those guys are looking a little bit flat, so let's see. Gob left. Pattern overlay. Let's go overlay. Let's zoom in on this. Okay, that's cool. I like that. Let's see. Actually, let's turn it on and off. Okay, so it makes things a little darker. So let's go ahead and brighten up the base skin a bit. Cool. We can rasterize that layer style. Done. And we may be able to do basically the same thing on this other guy, right? Let's try it. Okay, maybe we'll play with the rotation of that a bit, because I didn't like there was a bit of a line on his body there. And once again, I think we want to brighten the base a little bit more. Cool, let's do that. Rasterize layer style, boom. The tongue maybe wants to get some cool texture. Yeah, that one's okay. That's the one we used on the gob skin. Let's try. Whoa, that one's crazy. Ooh, that one's interesting. Oh yeah, it's kind of like a weird spottiness to that. I like that. Let's go with that. That's cool. Okay, we lost a little bit of contrast there. Let's pull the contrast up. Okay. Yeah, so you got to be careful about when you rasterize losing some of the blending mode look that you had. Okay, let's bring in some texture on the metal bits. Those definitely want some love. Where is that layer? It is. Did we lose the name of the layer? We might have lost the name of the layer. Oh no, here it is right here. Okay, cloak clasps, pattern overlay. I may even have a metal, kind of a metal like. Oh, I don't. Okay, I have no. I should work on that. I should find some metal overlays. That's cool. We could just go with some of our. I've actually got one here that might be interesting. Let's zoom in so we can see better what's going on. Okay, cool. Yeah, that just kind of breaks it up a little bit. Rasterize that one. And I always have gradients and everything on a different layer. So the base flat tone is what I apply the textures to, and then on top of that are where all the gradients live, because I don't want to have to, like, if I want to adjust the gradients on something, like let's say we wanted to adjust the red on the end of his ear. Well, I don't want to get in there and try and smudge this or move it around or do whatever, and then also disrupt the texture, because the textures are very sensitive to the granularity, right? Like if we get in there and we start messing with it, it's going to be really clear like where we've digitally painted and where we haven't, and that's bad, right? So just be aware of that. If you want to use this process, you got to be careful. Okay. Let's try adding some extra details to the face. So I'm going to go into new layer there. I have some brushes that are specifically for skin. I do have a freckles brush, so we can add. Tom, you were mentioning earlier, like adding freckles and stuff, dude. Yeah, definitely a fun phase. Think about different sizes where you might see more. Now, freckles are something that tend to be where you're going to see more sun exposure. So think about that as well as you're applying it. I mean, there can be, it's kind of a weird creature guy, so we don't have to maybe follow all 100% reality, but because the design is so out there, if we can bring in a little bit of realism to it, then it becomes more creepy, right? Because it's like we sort of buy into the fantasy of this guy more. It's like asking our audience to not have to go quite as far to buy into it. And maybe we put a little bit on his stomach here as well. This is another one where we're going to want to make sure this is on a different layer, because we don't want to have to disrupt that for messing with other stuff. I actually really like some of those bigger dots on there. I think that looks really cool. Yeah. All right. Yep. 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 That's cool. I'm digging that. Every time you glance, a lot has happened. That's good. That's good to hear. Means we're working at a reasonable pace here. So there's some things that, and we haven't really introduced any sort of like upper half tones or reflectivity. Again, this is more of an ambient look, so I don't want to go too crazy with that, but it's not a step that we want to ignore. Um, So the other thing that can be fun to explore is to just adjust overall the amount of ambient light. And the best way to do that is to just take all of your flats and apply a hue saturation adjustment layer connected to your flats stack, and just adjust the lightness, so we can just sort of bring the lightness down overall of the scene. You can see we can make it look very dim, and we could potentially go for like a really dim frontal lighting and then go with a really heavy rim light on one side, which is something that a lot of artists like to do. It can be quite successful. One thing that would work in our favor if we were to do this is it would allow all of the glowing elements to be a little bit more obvious, right? Like these things are going to be look brighter in comparison to the sort of dim front lighting. As well, it makes his overall shape read better against the lighter background. So I sort of liking the idea of maybe pulling it down just a touch, and then maybe we do bring in the rim light, right? That's something that I think we would probably save for the next stream. I think that's another chapter of the render, right, where we start to dial in the lighting. We start to bring in some of the specularity. We're gonna ultimately do that sort of like paint over on top to start to finesse and massage all the edges of things, and get some of the mist rolling around the character's cloak. There's a lot of cool stuff. We don't have really the glow of the tentacles hitting the cloak yet, right? There's a lot of these finishing touches that will really help this piece really pop, right? But I think we at this point at least we know where we're headed. I think we know it's heading in a good direction. I think its tone is definitely on point. And so just as like a preview, I think of how this might look with some of those final actions applied, I'll just quickly show, like, if we were to actually put in some of the glow from these elements in, you can see how that will start to look. Actually, I need to adjust the color of this now. Let's see, where's the lightness down, saturation up. Whoa, look at that. It's crazy. And then of course, down here and get some cool stuff going on. I don't want to go with just a soft thing. I think I'm going to try to have some like texture to the glow itself. So maybe there's some like strands of energy that are sort of wrapping through. Maybe there's some like veins that are looking like they're glowing from the inside. So there's definitely some cool stuff we can be doing there. But I don't want to rush that step. I think we need to have some care. And then of course, if we decide to bring in some rim lighting stuff later, let's see if we just quickly preview what might be some really strong rim lighting from this side over here, potentially. Play with it, really hitting and highlighting all these forms, right? And then we can play with how much light is coming in from the front, right? Like we want to really go dim with the front lighting to really make the rim lighting pop, right? We could do something like that. And then we get this really cool backlighting effect. But the point here is, when you have an organized process, when you think about the logic behind all the choices that you make, you have a lot of control over your scene, right? Versus just trying to slap some marks down and then hoping something comes out okay, which I know that nobody really thinks of it that way. But when I see sometimes students process, it's no surprise that things look a little bit messy in the end, right? Because it wasn't really thought out. So think about that, and hopefully as you watch this and you see some of these steps and hear some of how I'm thinking about it, it gives you ideas on how to approach something so you feel like you have a little bit more control over what you're painting. So I think that's the end of the stream. I hope you enjoyed it. Definitely I'm enjoying how this is coming along. Hopefully everybody's getting a sense of where we'll head with this to make this thing really, really shine. Tom, again, thanks for joining us. Always cool to see you. Good luck with all the stuff you're working on. Yeah. So Yeah, and just as a note for everybody too, remember I've got a fun little drawing guide that you can get for subscribing to the channel. So please consider supporting me by subbing, dropping a like, and leaving a comment. Thanks, and we'll see you next time. Take care.